Jail for the state Republican Party chairman? Let's get dialed in. Hello and welcome to Texas Talkin. Today we're talking about something that would almost be funny if it weren't so blatantly corrupt and downright dangerous. Imagine a government agency that claims to promote ethics but operates with all the fairness of a kangaroo court. That's right. We're talking about the Texas Ethics Commission, an agency that's been weaponized to target conservatives, silence political opponents, and now, believe it or not, potentially jail the chairman of the Republican Party of Texas, Abraham George. Yes, you heard that right. The Texas Ethics Commission, an organization that should be refereeing the political game, is being used to throw punches for the other team. They're not just bending the rules of basic political fairness, they're tossing them out the window along with common sense. And now they've set their sights on Abraham George, a man who's been working tirelessly to stand up for Texas conservatives and shake up the establishment. Apparently, that's his real crime, being too effective. So, what's the big accusation? Oh, the usual, vague, overblown technicalities dressed up as serious violations. It's like a bad sequel to a movie that nobody asked for. Meanwhile, actual corruption, the kind that makes taxpayers' blood boil, seems to go completely unnoticed. It's almost as if the Texas Ethics Commission isn't about ethics at all. It's about protecting the political elites and punishing anyone bold enough to challenge them. Imagine that. And here's the kicker. We're not just talking about slapping Abraham George with fines or meaningless reprimands. No, we're talking about jail time. Actual behind bars jail time. For what? Doing his job as a conservative leader? Standing up for Texans who feel their voices are being drowned out? This isn't ethics enforcement. This is political persecution, plain and simple. So today, we're going to expose what's really happening here, how the Texas Ethics Commission has become a tool of the ruling class, how it's targeting one of the most prominent conservative voices in Texas, and why this should terrify anyone who cares about freedom and democracy. Because if they can do this to Abraham George, who's next? Joining us to make some sense of the nonsensical is General Counsel for the Tarrant County Republican Party, constitutional lawyer, and ethics expert, Tony McDonald. Stay tuned. You're not going to believe this one. And making his Texas Talkin' debut is conservative civil rights attorney and Texas Ethics Commission expert, Tony McDonald. Tony, welcome aboard.
Yeah, thanks for being on the show. It's a pleasure to be on here with you.
The pleasure is all mine, sir. And the reason why I invited you on is to talk about the Texas Ethics Commission. You put up a post on X last week that brilliantly illustrated the insanity and unfairness of the Texas Ethics Commission and how it's targeting current Republican Party of Texas Chairman Abraham George. Walk us through that, if you would.
Sure, yeah. So this is an issue, I've been involved in fights against the Texas Ethics Commission for going on a decade now. Some of these fights have dragged on, and they're fights that, quite frankly, as a matter of principle, for us to be involved in as lawyers and working this, it's really important. It's important to 30 million Texans, to every Texan's free speech rights. But they're the kind of fights that just, an everyday average citizen, if they're not supported by the movement, if they're not supported by people like me, no one could afford to fight a battle like this. And so it's something that is super important. What's being done here to Republican Party Chairman George is, it's emblematic of something that could happen to literally any Texan. Anybody who gets involved in legislation, in local campaigns, you're subject to a complaint getting filed with the Texas Ethics Commission. This is a little known secretive body that has authority over, again, 30 million Texans. Every single citizen could get dragged in front of this body that meets, really in the bowels of the Texas Capitol. So, yeah,
sounds charming.
Yeah, it's. I've compared it to the Star Chamber. I've compared it to the secret speech police. I mean, you really can't say anything that's really too over the top. And as you know, I put this thread together because I wanted people to understand that they're looking at this George complaint filed by State Representative Cody Harris against Party Chairman Abraham George, and they're saying like, okay, well, what does this even mean? What is this? What is this about? What is it? An ethics complaint? Okay, what does that mean?
What could possibly happen?
Correct. And so I thought, okay, let me walk through the process. And if you start to walk through this process, you don't have to be a constitutional lawyer, as I've kind of stumbled into getting to do as a career. You don't have to be a constitutional lawyer to go, wait a second, this is just crazy. This isn't right. So let's start with the complaint. The complaint against Chairman George is that he communicated to Cody Harris and told him, a Republican state representative, I want you to support the Republican nominee for Speaker. And that vote's going to happen tomorrow, and that's all coming up. And he says, I want you as a Republican to support the Republican nominee. And if you don't do that, I and the party are going to be involved in primaries and other efforts to hold you accountable because you're not a Republican, right? You're not doing what a Republican is expected to do. So
makes sense to me.
Totally, right. What else should the Republican Party be doing but telling Republicans to
support Republicans?
Yeah, correct, right. So that is alleged. Cody Harris came in and filed this complaint with the Texas Ethics Commission. He says that is a second-degree felony called legislative bribery, that Chairman George has threatened him and threatened to give an economic advantage to a future political opponent, future campaign opponent, and that essentially by encouraging him to vote a certain way in a speaker's race, that's something that Texans are not allowed to do. So if you accept this premise that is a crime, that's not just something that Chairman George has done. This is something that tens of thousands of
I've done it.
Correct. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's doing it. Everybody's saying, hey, here's what my voice is, right? So here we have something, a politician who thinks that, okay, I can take the basic fundamental rights of basic fundamental activity of Texans and I can criminalize that. So through what process? So he files a complaint with the Texas Ethics Commission. Texas Ethics Commission is an 8-member body. It's composed of 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans. And I'll say these are some rhino Republicans,
of course.
Unsurprisingly, right? They are appointed by the political caucuses of the House and Senate. So the House Democrats and the Senate Democrats, the House Republicans and the Senate Republicans, they recommend candidates to the Speaker and Lieutenant Governor and Governor. And then from those lists, the Speaker, Lieutenant Governor, and Governor pick this 8-member body. Okay, so it's a bipartisan body. And they're very proud about this in litigation. Like I said, I've been in litigation against them for 10 years now. In that litigation, they say, hey, we're bipartisan, which means you're half Democrats, and we're independent, which means you're unaccountable to the voters. There's no way to vote on these people. There's no way to remove these people. They are double insulated from the public, triple insulated, really. So you're talking about people recommended by elected officials, then appointed by the Speaker, who is, elected by the representatives, and then cannot be removed from office. So that's who's dealing with this. They then have a staff. The staff, no joke, the executive director there is a guy named John Johnson. I can't imagine a more bureaucratic name. Here's the bureaucrat. The guy's John Johnson. Okay, John Johnson is, so you file a complaint. Cody Harris says, okay, this person. So he could have done it to you. He could have said, okay, Shilo, did the same thing. So he's engaged in bribery, second-degree felony. I think that he should be put in a cage. I think he should be stripped of his voting rights. I think he should be stripped of his Second Amendment rights. I think he should be locked away from his family, taken away any state licenses. We're going to basically destroy this person's life. Okay, that's what I think. I'm here, and I think that. So he could have filed a complaint against you just as much as he could file it against anybody who's involved. Right. And same thing, if somebody wants to go out there and they look and, you put a campaign yard sign in your yard and you don't put the right disclaimer on it, or you were supposed to file the pink form and you didn't file it on time, or you didn't do stuff. I've literally, to pick on a case that's one people haven't heard of, Little old black granny from Houston, Democrat lady, spends $3,400 at the Texas Ethics. She spends $3,400 on a police escort and a photographer. She discloses this voluntarily to the Texas Ethics Commission. Her political opponent looks at it, says, you didn't fill the forms out correctly. You didn't tell us where that money came from. Okay, she is then, for that $3,400 that she disclosed, she is ultimately fined $15,000 plus $2,500 for not showing up to the hearing in Austin because she didn't have a car. She literally told the commission she didn't have a car. So a little black granny from Houston expected to come there, fined $17,500 for disclosing $3,400 in activity. So this can happen to anybody who's involved in very low dollar tangential ways. Okay. So this complaint is filed. John Johnson, the bureaucrat, takes a look at this thing. And this is the decision that they're going to have to make. They look at it and they say, okay, does this state allegations that, if true, right? They don't know whether it's true, but if the political enemy, the Cody Harrises of the world, make an allegation that if those allegations are true, would be an offense under the election code or under the government code or these different statutes related to government that the Ethics Commission enforces. The commission says they must open an investigation. What would that mean? They would send written questions. They'd send a demand, first of all, to Chairman George or whoever the accused person is. They would have to answer. They'd have to answer substantively. They would send written questions. He'd have to answer those written questions. If he doesn't answer those written questions, he would be punished and he could be fined up to $5,000. He would be required to come to a hearing in Austin, take place in a closed door secret hearing in the basement of the Capitol. Okay. No attorneys appointed for him, unlike a criminal case where you would have an attorney appointed to represent you. You get no legal representation. And if you were to listen to a lawyer's advice and invoke your Fifth Amendment rights, they will make a finding against you and they will find that you violated the law in the civil side. They'd impose a civil penalty for violation because you invoked your Fifth Amendment rights. Okay. All in the meantime, this is not just a civil proceeding. This proceeding's happening in a closed door administrative hearing where they can impose civil penalties. Again, I talk about the little black granny from Houston who got the $17,500 fine, okay, for nothing, okay. They can impose a civil penalty, but they are the gatekeeper to make a referral to a DA for criminal prosecution. So you're literally at this agency, and there's an old Supreme Court justice quote where he says, any lawyer worth their salt will tell you don't talk to the police under any circumstances, right? If you're under criminal investigation, keep your mouth shut. But these people will put you between a rock and a hard place. They say, we've got a civil proceeding against you. You have to testify. We're going to call you to testify in this secret meeting. And if you don't testify, we're going to fine you civilly. If you do testify, we're going to use that evidence and we can then make a referral so you can go be criminally prosecuted. Oh, by the way, we don't have to shut down the civil proceeding. We can do both of these things at the same time. So you have this hearing, closed door hearing. I've been to these with clients and represented them there. Essentially, the commission is arrogant and snotty. They look down on you for resisting what they expect. Most people who show up to this they're like, oh, please be lenient to me, right? So that's what they're used to. So if you show up and you say, I don't think I did anything wrong, they absolutely bring the hammer and they hit you with a maximum penalty. Then, even though they've already done this secret hearing, they'll then say, okay, well, now we're going to order a formal hearing. Okay. Now that is an open door. That happens in front of the public. It's in front of the cameras. Okay. But it's a do-over. So the commission staff who are appointed by the commission, who are arguing to the commission, okay, these same people are all the same people, okay, get a trial run with you in secret, and then they do it again in a formal hearing if that's what you ask for.
Having already done a dress rehearsal, essentially.
Exactly right. And so, but you think, oh, I want to get to this formal hearing because I just want this process to be over with. They can indefinitely delay the formal hearing by hitting you with subpoenas, taking you to court over those subpoenas. And you think about it, they issue a subpoena. They want your documents, or they want, testimony, or they want some other kind of evidence against you, giving evidence against yourself. You object. So you're in a normal court, the other party sends you a subpoena and you go talk to the judge. The judge is a neutral. Here, the commission sends you a subpoena, staff does, And then you go to their bosses and you say, hey, can you stop your staff from asking us for this? You're literally asking the same people who are investigating you to adjudicate your case. So that's what goes on with this thing. If you finally get to the formal hearing, once you have the formal hearing, in most trials can take days or weeks because it takes a long time to flesh things out. They have this little short kind of one, it'll happen in a few hours. They'll cap the amount of time you can make your argument. And then they will, in every single case that has ever happened, they will find, unanimously against you because you've resisted.
Say that again. In every single case that has ever happened.
Correct. So
wow.
Just understand this, out of the thousands of cases that have been filed at the Ethics Commission where people have been dragged into these closed door hearings, a tiny, tiny fraction, like single, maybe double digits at this point, but it's like fewer than 20 cases have ever even persisted to the point of this formal hearing. Okay, at those formal hearings, I am aware of no cases where the person who is accused has ever won. And why would that? Why would the commission drag it to this point if they didn't think you were guilty? Because they're the prosecutor and the judge, right? Why would they ever do anything? So at that point, they make a finding, they impose a civil penalty, they could make a criminal referral. You then have 30 days, 30 business days, so it is more than 30 business days to appeal to a district court. That has only happened a handful of times. And, the one real case where this stuff has been litigated, Michael Quinn Sullivan was accused by two Rhino committee chairs under Joe Strauss of not registering as a lobbyist in 2010 and 2011. I was literally on a conference call today trying to take that case to the U.S. Supreme. We are working to take that case to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's due January 24th of this month. So the appeal that you take to a district court, literally they have spent over $1 million litigating against Michael. It has taken over 11 years to litigate.
Wow.
There's no end in sight. And so that's what you have. So you think like this is a process that any Texan, by their political nasty, anybody who's a nasty person who says, I want to drag my person through my enemy through this political gutter, all they have to do is to allege a violation that they don't even have to have the goods. They can do it on hearsay. They can do it on information and belief. They allege a violation of the accused, and all of a sudden, for free, they don't even have to pay for it. The state, with unlimited taxpayer funds, prosecutes that person. That can drag on for 15 years.
Tony, if this is not weaponization of a government agency and lawfare, I don't know what is. It makes me think of what they've done to go after people like President Trump, people like Attorney General Ken Paxton, basically pulling out all the stops and finding some technical way to get somebody hung up in the judicial system.
Yeah, I said, look, this Cody Harris complaint, this here is the Fannie Willis of Texas, right? Because it literally reminds me of that. Because you got to remember that case, Mark Meadows was indicted for felony charges for doing what? For literally making phone calls to set up phone calls and meetings between President Trump and a governor, right? That was his participation in the conspiracy. There was some poor fellow who was indicted for reserving the room at the Capitol in which the electors for Trump met, right? So their whole theory was you couldn't propose an alternative slate of electors. That was a horrible criminal conspiracy, which is totally wrong. That's what was done in Hawaii in the Kennedy-Nixon case in 1960. It's kind of how you deal with this. If you think that, one candidate won, you have to preserve those rights. Just for the guy reserved the room, right? So you're talking about completely insane legal theories, maliciously brought against people. Why? To just absolutely hammer them. And you see it like literally how many of these people plea bargained, right?
Probably most.
Many of them, right?
Yeah.
Some of them were able to lawyer up and fight and they are winning, but, and it's not surprising. So that's what happens at the Ethics Commission. This is why people don't know about it, because people get dragged into this. If they're wealthy, influential, powerful people, they know the right lawyer who they say, okay, go over there and deal with this. And what do? They settle. They say, hey, look, Ethics Commission, you guys are really important. These rules are really important. I'm really sorry I didn't fill your form out correctly. let's settle. And they say, okay, $500 and it'll go away, right? But the regular citizen who doesn't know to call, who doesn't know even what to do, doesn't even know what this means, right? They get dragged into a process and they either show up and they say, this is the end of my participation. I'll go away. I'll never participate again. What do I need to pay you? And pay them off. Or a lot of them don't show up. It's the little black granny from Houston, okay, who can't even drive to Austin to come to these hearings.
She doesn't have a car.
She didn't have a car, okay? And so she didn't come to the hearings, and they hit them with a default judgment, and they hammer them because they say, oh, you didn't respect our process enough. So this is what we're dealing with, and people don't notice it. So I'm really happy that this complaint got filed against, Chairman George, because it's like, oh, people go, well, what is this, right?
Well, this is something people should know about and frankly need to know about. A byproduct of this, my concern is a byproduct, and maybe it isn't a byproduct, maybe it's by design, is that it discourages regular everyday people like me from participating in the political process unless you have the resources to have an army of attorneys at your disposal to ask questions about filling out campaign documents.
You call the one-man army, right? There's only a handful of us who even know how. Most lawyers don't even know this process. That's my fear, is we're going to see a chilling effect because of this. People who say, okay, I'm not going to participate. I don't want to get dragged into this. But actually, the fear, I think people have more courage than that. My real fear is that there's other bullies out there who are like, oh, this Cody Harris came up with a nice strategy. Let me deploy that against somebody I don't like. And so I think you may see some copycat stuff here in the coming weeks. My hope is that this, particularly the George complaint, it's so ridiculous that I think there's a possibility the commission may just reject it outright. They do reject these things whenever it is a fringe legal theory and they don't want to take it on. One would think that they would have the political self-preservation and not pick a fight with the, chairman of the Republican Party. But again, my fear is, somebody who alleges something a little more innocuous, so-and-so didn't fill their forms out correctly. And, they do it against Sally Sue Homemaker, who in the Republican Party chair.
Good luck. Good luck.
Absolutely.
So, Tony, all of this begs the question, and I have very little confidence or faith in the Sunset Advisory Committee, but all of this begs the question: what steps would need to be taken to rid ourselves of this rogue, reckless agency once and for all?
Yeah, absent the court stepping in, and it's very difficult to set the standing up and the kind of cases that would get this in front of a court. I've been working at that. It's a challenge. Obviously, we have part of it going to the U.S. Supreme Court, but it is difficult to litigate it. So the real answer is we got to be asking our leaders here in Texas to do something about it. The good news, as you mentioned, is there is this Sunset Commission review going on of the Texas Ethics Commission. Now, that is not that's a bureaucracy reviewing a bureaucracy. So you can't trust, they're going to do something about it. But it does mean that it is a topic of discussion, right? Mm-hmm. It's before the legislature this session. This is something that legislature's going to have multiple cracks at this session to do something if they so choose. And so the answer, as difficult as this is, but it's a practical answer, is everybody needs to be burning down the phone calls. Call your representative, call your state senator, ask them, hey, if the chairman of the Republican Party can be dragged on a process like this, and lawyers are saying that could take 15 years of litigation and $1 million, what chance do I as a private citizen have to withstand this process? Why am I at risk as an involved citizen? You need to make sure that this commission does not have jurisdiction over people like me. If you're going to have a closed-door tribunal in the bowels of the Capitol, it shouldn't be dragging people from El Paso to Texarkana to Dalhart, into those closed proceedings. So I think Texans should be contacting the legislature and demanding that they not be subject to jurisdiction before the TEC. That's the simple ask, and it's the simple answer.
Well, Tony, as I said, this is a story that should definitely be told, and the more people who know about the TEC, the Texas Ethics Commission, the better. I want to thank you for coming on tonight and talking to us about this.
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you for bringing awareness to it. And if folks that are out there, if they have questions, they can find me at Tweet Tony Mac on X, and TonyMcDonald.com is my law firm website. Feel free to reach out. Certainly, if anybody's ever subject to something like this, I do not want you to suffer alone. right? I do a lot of pro bono work, and at risk of my, hair going gray and sleep and, taking care of my daughter and everything else. Like I am willing to help people who are subjected. I do not want people to suffer through the Ethics Commission alone. If you face something there, get in touch with me. I will do what I can to help you.
We need more attorneys like you, Tony. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the great state of Texas. Stay dialed in to interviews and content just like this by clicking that follow button on my Facebook page, or hit the subscribe button to learn more about exclusive access that you won't want to miss.